Hey, welcome back everybody. Who wants to talk about Washington? I know I do. Washington State is one of my favorite states. I lived there in the 1990s and really enjoyed my time there. I also enjoy visiting still. Washington has incredibly quirky people, a handful of big cities, and mountain views that'll make you question atheism. Sure, it has earthquakes and exploding volcanoes, but at least you're near Canada and can get your meds on the cheap. Now this video, like most of my videos, is directed at people relocating or thinking about relocating to a certain location. In this case, Washington. So keep that in mind when you're leaving a poorly thought out comment in the section below. Also, this list is really in no particular order, it's just 10 things. That being said, before you start canoeing up the Pacific to start a new life, you should watch my top 10 reasons not to move to Washington. Number 10, the names of places. So this one isn't as much a reason not to move to Washington as it's just weird and makes you kind of wonder about the thinking of the people in Washington. The first thing is this. Washington named one of its mountains Mount Rainier, named after a man who once fought against the Americans in the Revolutionary War. A British admiral named Peter Rainier Jr. Sure, it was a long time ago, but still. I mean, what's next? Lake Osama bin Laden? And now, that's not it. They also have a few poorly named towns and other locations that you just kind of wonder what they were thinking when they named these places. They have a town called Concrete. They also have a town named Tokeland, which brings on a whole new meaning now that weed is legal in Washington. They have a place called Medical Lake. They have a town called Vader. They also have a place called Ilwaco, which the locals call it Ilwaco. And that's just a couple of them. Look at their map. It's just weird. Number 9. It's wet. It rains all the time in half of this state. The Cascade Mountains stop a lot of the rain from going to the east side, but it rains all the time. Now, a lot of that rain comes in the form of a mist-type rain. Most of the people in Seattle won't really consider that rain, but if you're coming from the southwestern part of the country, it's rain to you. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. Number 8. Unhealthy places. Washington State has 2 of the top 20 most unhealthy counties in America. Good going, Washington. Adams County, which is just southwest of Spokane, has a 34% obesity rate and 16% of the adults smoke. Good going, Adams County. Now, not to be outdone, Grays Harbor County waddles in with a 37% obesity. 37% of the residents are considered obese. They are also ranked 35 out of 38 counties for length of life, meaning people in Grays Harbor County don't really have that much of a shelf life. Number 7. Red vs. Blue. Like the other 2 West Coast states, Washington is the tale of 2 states. You have the western portion that tends to vote for the Democrats, and the eastern portion which tends to vote for the Republicans. This, of course, brings up that age-old fantasy of splitting the state in 2. This is like a second-grade mentality. If you don't agree with me, I don't want anything to do with you. We're no longer friends. Number 6. Traveling. Traveling around Washington sucks because of the Puget Sound and the Cascade Mountains. Seattle, Tacoma, and Olympia are a few of the state's most populated cities, and the downside of living here is they're all on the shores of the Puget Sound, which is very hard to navigate with bridges and going around, inlets and stuff like that. And before anyone does comment, yes, the whole thing is not the Puget Sound. I get it. There's a handful of straits, bays, and inlet. Got it. Understood. Most people call it the Puget Sound when they're just kind of describing it. So stop typing. The Puget Sound does make it rough to get around Seattle and the surrounding area. And if you want to head east, you got to go over the Cascade Range. And sometimes, especially during the winter, that could get a little scary. Number 5. Bigfoot hunters and preppers. Washington's another one of those states that has all those end-of-the-world type prepper people setting up camp in the backwoods. And it's not just those freaks wandering the woods of Washington, it's Bigfoot hunters. Yeah, they're out there hunting Bigfoot. They're like trying to track him. You might as well be tracking the Easter Bunny. They're both make-believe. I've always liked that. I like it when someone becomes an expert. They claim they're the leading Bigfoot expert. Okay, can you be an expert on something that's make-believe? It just doesn't make sense to me. I had actually, side note to that one, I had a coworker years ago I worked with at Comcast, and he claimed he was a leading expert on the zombie apocalypse and how to survive it. I just used to stare at that dude while he went on and on. It was so weird. Number 4. Second worst drivers. Washington has notoriously bad drivers. Now this is according to Wallet Hub and the Department of Transportation. They come in 49. Now, to be fair, they also have really bad roads and bad weather, so they might be victims of a bad situation. The only place that has it worse is Hawaii. Side note, Hawaii has an interstate. How? Interstate means between states. I have never heard of a bridge from Hawaii to California, Oregon. Never understood that one. Number 3. Bad retirement. Washington State is the 4th worst place to retire in the United States. Now that's according to MoneyRate.com. The unemployment rate in Washington is higher than most states. This is especially bad given Washington's higher than average cost of living, the study reads. On top of all that, it's cold and wet. Older folks don't like the cold. That's why so many of them retire in Florida and Arizona and places like that. Number 2. Strange Google searches. Now, this one isn't really something that should stop you from moving to a state, but it just kind of gives you an idea of what kind of people you're dealing with if you're living in Washington. Google lists every year what each state Googles more than any other state. There are some strange people trying to find some weird knowledge in Washington. Here's just a brief summary of what they're looking at in Washington. Circumcisions, Dungeons and Dragons, gluten, Judas Priest, non-alcoholic beer, Rachel Maddow, TV host, unicorn tattoos, multiple happy hours, and latex clothing. Latex clothing? Huh. Maybe Washington's alright after all. Looks like my Google searches. And number 1. Serial killers. Washington has an odd amount of serial killers. Many have either been born and raised in the state or spent some time living there. Now here's just a few. Kenneth Bianchi spent some time in Bellingham, Washington as a security alarm installer guy. Ted Bundy was from Tacoma and went to UW as a law student. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, now he was from Utah, but he did all his killings, if not all of them, most of them, in Washington. And even university student Amanda Knox, who's accused and convicted and then acquitted, then convicted again for killing a roommate in Italian court, yeah, she's from Seattle too. That right there is enough to stay in Kansas, or wherever you're from. Serial killers are always a deterrent from moving to an area, in my opinion. Alright, so that's my list, the top 10 reasons not to move to Washington. Washington is a great state and I really like it. It just has some things that, might not be for everyone if you're thinking about moving there. Some funny things and some pretty weird things and some things that you should really consider if you're thinking about relocating. Anyway, I appreciate you watching my video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to give a big thumbs up, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Everybody have a great day. Be nice to each other.